Welcome back to the Convo Couch, everyone. Pasta Jardula here with a special guest, and really special to me because my first time on my favorite show, Crosstalk, as you know, the show where conservatives, liberals, progressives, independents, whatever, they get together and they sit down and they talk. They avoid the cancel culture and they get to learn things about each other because that's what it should be all about, learning things from each other, not the cancel culture. And I got a guy on here, Ed Martin. He's awesome. We actually were on the show together, and I can't remember the other guests. I know
wasn't memorable.
What's that?
Wasn't memorable. You and I were memorable. I don't remember either. I know the host was a good guy. I think she was actually, I take it back. Wasn't she the I think she was a Republican who hated Trump.
She was a Democrat.
Oh, was she
one of the neoliberal type that really kind of, the whole issue I think was propaganda, not propaganda, but pollsters, and me and you immediately.
Oh yeah.
Pollsters aren't pollsters nowadays. They're more about propagandists. They want you to believe that, everybody wanted to vote for Joe Biden, so I got to go in there and vote for Joe Biden.
Right.
Nobody ever pays the price when they're wrong. But we had a great time, and we agreed a lot. And I think the last year of Trump's presidency, I found myself agreeing with a lot of conservatives on certain issues. I consider myself a leftist libertarian. Left-leaning views. I still believe in Medicare for all. I want to have some sort of climate control. I like Tulsi Gabbard's off fossil fuel act. That's why I supported her. But I'm a strong believer in my civil liberties, and I'm a strong believer in fair elections, and I'm an anti-regime guy. I don't want to intervene, and I like to channel my inner Ron Paul.
Here you go.
Ed, I want you to tell everybody what you're doing, where you come from, and what you got in store, because I have a feeling we'll have you back on the show today. Not today, but in the future if we don't get too crazy with each other today. So go right ahead.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I run Phyllis Schlafly's organization. So the late Phyllis Schlafly, who was one of the iconic American leaders, and she happens to be a conservative woman, but history will mark her as one of the great leaders. She was born in 1924 and was active in politics from the middle of the 1940s through Donald Trump's presidency. In fact, just about 4 weeks before he was elected, she passed away. He came to her funeral, and she, in the intervening 70 plus years, Phyllis wrote and talked about America and America's exceptionalism in a way that I think echoes through right now. She did agree in her life that you had to pick a party. There were only two parties. She went for the Republican Party, and she spent a lot of her time battling against the kingmakers, she called them. Now we call them maybe the globalists inside the Republican Party and also in the Democrat Party. So I'm a lawyer by training, but I practiced law for a while, but I've done a lot of public policy, done politics. And so about 6 years ago, when I was chairman of the Republican Party, you talk about Ron Paul. One of the things Ron Paul was masterful at during his period where he was nationally ascending, he organized the precinct level participation in the parties, Republican Party. And when I took over the Republican Party in Missouri because the powers that be forgot to count the votes. And we went down into the Central Committee, and I won, squeaked in, and I became chairman of the Missouri Party, sat on the Republican National Committee, went into that, Fox and Hen House. We could talk about that too. And by the way, just to tell you, both parties, Republican and Democrat, are merely their front organizations. They're fundraising rackets for a set of fundraisers, both parties all the time. Everybody knows it. So anyway, Phyllis Schlafly had built her organizations called Eagle Forum, a network, and she asked me to work with her while I was chairman of the Republican Party of Missouri. And then when she was older, she said, "Why don't you take over as president?" So I'm president of a national organization. We rebranded it Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. I do a radio show, I do a lot of media, and we do publishing, and we move right across the spectrum. I would say the thing that's different from us, we're conservative, we are America first types, and we got a lot of issues we can talk about, but we know politics. A lot of the conservative think tanks, liberal think tanks, they're again fundraising rackets to pay people. They don't really want to move the needle. They don't really want to understand what is happening. And so we do want to move the needle. We want to understand what's happening. And so we pissed everybody off most of the time. Even Trump supporters periodically. But I think we have a track record of influencing what's going on very positively. So I'm glad to talk, and I think we'll find lots of agreement even when we disagree.
Yeah, and I think this will be a day that we will disagree on a few things because the CPAC speech, because these are the reasons why I will not support Donald Trump. These are the reasons that really aggravate me about Donald Trump. And I'd like to discuss the speech with you where we can kind of get into it. Maybe you can give me a little insight to what he's trying to say or what he's trying to get across. But at the end of the day, the CPAC speech was more of the same. It reminded me of 2015 when he was out there once again. It seemed very anti-immigrant, the speech. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that because I think we'll find some common ground on what actually causes immigration. I think a lot of progressives or independent media mind-speaking people, leaning people, leftist libertarians like myself, were giving Donald Trump a chance at the last 6 months, hoping that he would pardon Julian Assange. He did not, and I think that was the biggest balk of his life, and I will never, ever support him because of that. Now, had he pardoned Julian Assange, I might honestly wear a friggin' MAGA hat for you over here. Right. But it did not happen. But I don't want to get into that. I want to get into what's going on right now because it's obvious after the CPAC speech that he's revving up for another run. Just curiosity, Ed, is there somebody else you'd like to see run other than Donald Trump, or is he still your guy 100%?
Well, I'd answer that by being smart about the reality. Again, like I said, Phyllis used to teach us. I'm not sure who's out there yet, right? I mean, one of the things I would have said is that the day before Rush Limbaugh died, the two iconic leaders of the center right in America, the two voices that had the most impact were Rush Limbaugh and Donald Trump. Rush is gone. There's nobody on the level of Trump. So I happen to disagree with you. I think Donald Trump, in this sense, I think Trump knew that the only thing he could do was make a play that looks like he's going to run to stay relevant and to protect himself and to give himself what he needs to have more options. I'm not sure he'll run. I don't know about that. But look, I think there can be leaders that will emerge. I think there's some people out there that are starting to show that they have the courage and understand the game. But for now, it's Donald Trump's party. It's Donald Trump's America. He's winning on the issues. Even Biden is taking his position on major issues, whether it's how he reacted to the Saudi Arabian, the intelligence the other day, what Biden is doing on some of the Green New Deal. He's not doing as much as he said he would because I think he knows the reality. Nuclear, everybody's for nuclear now. So and we get into that a little bit, but I think the CPAC speech was. I will agree with you on this. He did what he knows how to do, which is the 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 Trump. And I think here's one trap that he doesn't see. I hope his people see if they want to succeed. 2015 and 16, he won because the establishment in both parties didn't know how to handle him, and the earned media carried him. You cannot sustain a political movement without understanding how politics works at the grassroots level. Trump never did that. He never took over the RNC. It's the same money making racket it was before. And so if he now is going to try to do the earned media thing, yes, he has a 74 million million woman army behind him, but it doesn't work. Doesn't sustain itself, and so we have to see what happens coming forward. I just one more footnote. I worked really hard for candidates in 2018, arguing that look what Trump did when he got in office. Good judges, tax cuts, reducing government, getting us out of stupid international deals, holding back on the wars, tougher on immigration, which I like. And I went out there and I campaigned. No, the Trump voters didn't care. They didn't turn out in 18 because he wasn't there, right? They're Trump voters, this 25% of the Republican Party, the new part that's really energetic. And we got swamped, meaning Republicans. 2022, I don't think it's a shoo-in that the Republicans win because a lot of the Trump voters are looking up and saying some of what you already said, which is the election wasn't free or fair. Why the heck are we going to work our tail off for Congressman so-and-so or this candidate such and such? So it's a really interesting time, and there's a lot more uncertainty out there than people realize.
Okay, the first part you said, I got to really agree with you. Like, we don't know what Trump's got to do to keep himself safe. I've been saying that myself. Like, all right, what's going to happen to this dude? They're going to off this dude off because it's like, he really supposedly, I mean, we don't know at this point. I question everything, Ed. I don't know what to believe. I don't know if he's part of the whole kabuki theater, the charade, or he is a little bit anti-establishment and they want him out so badly, or this thing is going back and forth. I don't believe that Biden won his primary at all. I believe there was a lot of fugazi stuff going around in the primaries. I've been into this election stuff since 2016, and the actual framework of our elections is just totally disgusting. The one thing he didn't mention, and we'll get into that down the road, is he didn't mention the words proprietary software and talk about open source. Other than that, he did hit some good points. He didn't mention some other things. But let's talk about the immigration thing, because that's the thing I have so many fights about with my friends. We obviously know Donald Trump said he's not starting a new party. Well, let's start right there, actually.
Yeah.
Don't you think it's better? I heard you saying in your open that what's her name? Phyllis believed that there's only two parties and you have to choose one. Isn't it time? Because this is the thing I think that the biggest mistake Bernie Sanders made in 2016 was not walking away from the DNC and going right to the Green Party when Jill Stein opened the door and said, hey, listen, I'll be your vice. Come on in. And even though he would have split the vote and Donald Trump would have won then, come around 2020, we would have a strong third party right now. Donald Trump, if anybody can do it, isn't that more important, starting another party? The fact that you said it is the most important thing, but here comes along a guy who could start another party, the whatever, what would you call it?
Well, I think some people call it the Patriot Party.
That's what they call it.
Yeah. Look, let's start with this. I think we'll find agreement on this point. The political system in America is corrupt, and the two parties are the ones corrupting it, along with the media that makes money off of it, and the capital, the swamp that loves the power of it. So I am acknowledging it is a deeply flawed system. What Phyllis meant, and what I would say, is if you want a third, fourth, or fifth party, you got to go to Europe, where having a multiple parties, you can pick a prime minister together. You know, you can pool together and get center right and center left that care about X or Y. In America, we're stuck with the two parties. It's a math problem. It's not a problem of ideology. Again, we're Phyllis, even though people they perceive us, meaning Phyllis Schlafly and myself, as hardliners on issues, we're practical. And the practicality is we are stuck with a two-party system. And within the two parties right now, in my opinion, the Republican Party is actually closer to what I want, which is a populist, responsive party that is more isolationist, that is more. Actually, I'm with you on some issues. I would in the transformation of this economy now, I would do things like I would have direct payments to people in especially in industries that are transitioning. We have to change our mindset because we're changing the whole way we live based on the economy. But I don't want to digress. But back to that point, I thought it was very smart of him to signal that because he knows it's his party. Look, 85% of the party is Trump. 15%, and it is Mitch McConnell, Liz Cheney, is not Trump, but that's not, this is his party. People that want to leave and start another one, go over there. It won't go anywhere. And I just mean it's a math problem. And look, the math problem is, Perot had a movement, Buchanan had a movement. You're right. If you had 20 years to wait, you would maybe two or three cycles. You could maybe get there, but I again, because of the corruptness and the money, you're stuck where you are, where we are, and now we got to live with that. I think maybe talk to me after one more election cycle, and we'll say, well, we're totally broken. We need a totally different approach. But I think for now, that's where we are.
I'm praying hard that the Libertarian Party comes up with I was a Tulsi Gabbard supporter, but I hope we get a Gabbard or Mosh ticket over there. And I hope somebody breaks through on the Greens, other than Howie Hawkins, to get a real good party, get some other choices. I think if we see more votes go out across the board to different parties, it might change the whole structure of what's going on. I believe desperately that we need to get away from the two-party duopoly. But I know Donald Trump owns that party, so why would he walk away? So let's talk about the first part of the speech, okay?
Yep.
And this is the part, we're going to get into this because we're going to talk about immigration. But before that, I hate this BS talk, really, to tell you the truth, Ed. The whole socialism leads to communism kind of BS. Let me say this much, because I know you're dying to speak about this right now and everything like this. I can't stand this because I started off with those activists out in the street out there, and I've obviously transitioned into doing more of a media thing, but they don't necessarily want full-blown socialism or full-blown Stalin communism. What they want is workers' rights. They see what their grandparents did 50, 60 years ago, the way my grandfather could sweep the docks and still buy a house, send 4 kids to college, go away 2 weeks out of the year, and then die comfortably in a hospital. When you think socialism, they're thinking social safety nets, right? And we already have a social security card. We build roads, there's parks, there's a fire department, whatnot. Why do we have to have this polarization of putting people in boxes and whatnot when we already have somewhat of a quasi-socialist kind of country? And for the most part, people want to see us stop wasting money on these crazy wars and the socialism for the rich. Every single time the elites, they get the bailouts. Hey, Donald Trump signed on to the CARES Act, whether we like it or not. Why are we continuing this conversation when I hear my mom go, oh, it's socialism, it's communism? I almost heard a little Alex Jones in Donald Trump when he said that the other day. Go ahead, give me your comments on that.
Well, no, look, I understand. I let me say a couple things about that. One, when I hear this argument about socialism, they did this in Georgia, right? In Georgia, the Senate races, they said, the Republicans said, be afraid of socialism, be afraid of socialism. Nobody cares. That's not what motivates voters, right? So that's a kind of swamp speak of the Republican kind of conoscenti. They like to tell each other things about socialism.
But Trump has always got on that kind of bandwagon.
Oh, no, I know. I was going to say
communism.
Right. Well, Trump, he wasn't always. I'm not sure he did much of that in 15, 16. He picked up that tick along the way with a lot of these other parties. And it's shorthand for a certain part of the Republican Party to hear what they want to hear. But I agree with all the rest of your analysis. I will say this. One of the things, and again, I'm very referential to the late Phyllis Schlafly because of what I saw her do. She wrote for many decades on the Soviet communists and the threat of what the Soviets thought of us and how they thought of America and what it meant and the aid and the infiltration and all. I think one thing Trump did was we now know, if we look around the world, what real communism, what the communists in China do, right? They are actually persecuting the Uyghurs, right? They're actually, doing things. And I do think
about that, Ed. I don't know about that. I don't want to. Well, once again, when we get to the foreign policy part about the Uyghurs, we'll talk about our role in Operation Mongoose and what we did in that region to cause that fanaticalness. But go ahead.
Well, I won't. I'm happy to talk about that. I won't. I don't think we need to concede that we have the communist regime in China. Whoever helped them along the way, including the West, they're nasty guys. They're nasty guys that are taking intellectual property. They're taking a lot of things from us, and they're a threat in a way. And my point here is that I do think the shorthand, and I agree with you, we're no longer a free market country, right? Our nation is no longer, if it ever was, it's free market managed. And the managing, as you point out, is done by the people in power. And so why do we have Medicare expansion? In large part because the seniors vote. And you're never going to take it away. Trump was the first Republican to do that, by the way. The other nitwits will stand up there. Paul Ryan said, we're going to means test Medicare. And the whole country went, no, you're not. We don't like socialism, but we like that socialism, right? So, and same thing with Social Security and other things. I do think, however, some of the growth of government, especially on the censorship stuff, you alluded to Assange, the power of government, all parties, to take, and the swamp, that's really the swamp, to stomp on things that kept us freer. It's more like communism than it is like what we want to believe. And that foil is useful in terms of our mindset for the American people. Remember, we're not trying to govern, and I got to be careful how I say this. They get mad when they say Trump doesn't tell the truth. No politician, if he speaks, is telling you the truth. This is politicians. And the point is, are they directionally moving us, in my estimation, in the way that will give us more of what I think we need? And I agree, by the way, just to say it, I agree with you on Assange. I think it was a terrible mistake by Trump. I want to believe he didn't do the pardon because he was pressured by the swamp and he fell for it, because I want to believe his instincts were to do it, because I want to feel good about it myself, because I'm annoyed with that. I think it was a mistake. That single act would have transformed a whole set of voters in America to look at Trump, and they would have said, okay, I can't stand that other stuff he does, but he got it right on that one, and I'll give him a chance. And because he didn't, they're looking up at people, and I don't have a problem with Amash, but Justin Amash is not going to be a national leader. And so people are saying he's great. That doesn't give us a movement. That doesn't move our directionally in a way that I would like, and I think Trump missed that. So,
well, I wanted Amash to be on the vice president ticket for the real leader of this country, which I think is one of the best politicians out there and the best leaders, and that's Tulsi Gabbard. When it comes to policy, and this is something that the Democrats on the left, a lot of establishment people couldn't understand. It wasn't her we liked. It was her policies. It was civil liberties, fair elections, anti-regime change war, you know what I'm saying, but still having compassion to get some type of medical system, some public option, whatnot. And just the one comment I want to make too is I think sometimes when we talk about communism, we mistake communism for authoritarianism. I mean, look at us. We have a capitalist system right now, and we are chained down so badly because when in a capitalist system, when everything's for sale, your government's for sale. So guess what? They can buy that, and they have. But I don't want to get too deep into that because I want to transition into, because I think that was a good comment, what you said, and we'll get more into it. But let's talk about the immigrant thing, because you say that you are strong immigration support, protection on our borders. My mom, her friends, we always argue about this all the time. Ed, isn't it time that we kind of face the fact, and this is something that the Democrats haven't done, this is something that the Republicans haven't done, this is the worst part about Donald Trump's presidency, was his policies in the global South. Can't we admit for once that the main cause of immigration of these migrants coming up from the global South is our interactions in their government? I mean, it wasn't Donald Trump's fault. He didn't remove Manuel Zelaya. That was Obama. But he did continue the policies in Venezuela. We did have stuff go on in Bolivia. We did continue the policies in El Salvador. Had we stay out of these countries and not enforce the Monroe Doctrine like we do to this day, we wouldn't have a migration problem. Can you not agree, or you do disagree on that?
I mean, I disagree, because I'm not sure how you get to that as the cause. I'm willing to say something like there's certainly multi-factors in any crisis. I think so. I also think the Monroe Doctrine did not mean meddle in every country as we often do. It meant as to the interests, systemic interests. Like I have a big problem with the role of the Chinese regime in parts of our hemisphere, because I think that's dumb, because we're allowing somebody, the system is against us, whether that's, Venezuela or somebody, that's a different thing. But I guess I would say this. I want our country, for a change, to have a policy on immigration that is actually for we the people and governed by what we want, not what big tech or big corporations want, which is cheaper labor, and or what the cartels want. Because right now, we don't control the borders, especially with Biden now. It's controlled by the cartels. So when you tell me who gets in is because they're coming refugees, I say maybe. I don't disagree that some of it, but I think a lot of it is also there's a money-making apparatus that the cartels are doing. It's not just drugs, and it's not just sex trafficking. It's plenty of regular trafficking, getting people in. And I want a policy where we decide what we actually want, because we get into this a little bit. It's a little further down the trail. I don't think we have an America right now that is ready to assimilate people into America. Your forebears, mine are Irish in the late 1800s and early 1900s. They came and they became. We still celebrate our Irishness, but they were melted. Yeah. They were melted into America, and they bought into what we had. Now we could debate whether that was good or not, but right now we have a nation that is happy to have, for all kinds of reasons, both parties, hyphenated Americans and our young people don't buy into it.
But you don't think our interactions in Venezuela has anything to do with a lot of people from Venezuela migrating here?
No,
you don't think that Manuel Zelaya being removed? I mean, we haven't tried this, Ed. We haven't tried to say, hey, how about instead of for resource extraction, we leave these people be. I didn't eat a banana for several years. Why? Because of the coups that we supported in the North Triangles that were there strictly to help corporations and resource extractions like the UFC, the United Fruit Company, which became Chiquita and Dole. I mean, if we would just pull out of these countries, I mean, Elliot Abrams.
But wait a second. I'm happy to give you the. I'm happy to say that it's a factor. But I don't think anybody that's looking at the whole thing says it's the only factor.
I think it's the main factor. Yeah.
No, how is it the main fact? Go to the Mexican border. What's coming across the border is not all Venezuelans. In fact, most of the Venezuelans that get across the borders are paying their way into Florida, and they're actually getting to be citizens, and they're voting Republican.
Yes.
What I'm saying is go to the border and look at who's coming across.
Most of those people coming from the North Triangle, and we've talked to them. We talked to them.
That's not Venezuela. That's not Venezuela only.
That's Salvador. Guatemala, that's Honduras. That's where we have a lot of corporate interest, though, as well. We have a base deal, a military base, a weapons deal that was from Israel with Salvador, and they're training troops in El Salvador how to keep the migrants in. We're actually propping up these governments that are so brutal to their people, causing chaos. I mean, I think it has to be, if it's not the main factor, it has to be a big factor. And we've never acknowledged the fact that we should pull out of these in supporting these governments and let these people be. And then then maybe we won't even need a wall.
Well, I guess that's an interesting idea, but why not build a wall and build a border that is actually controlled, and then have somebody say, I've never heard the numbers. You can tell me, maybe I'm wrong. The number of people that are here are happening because of all this stuff that you just said. I have never heard that as the dominant reason. But again, why can't we have a system in this country that gives us a secure border, and then we decide who comes in or doesn't come in. We decide how flawed our people are. If you could make your case more compelling, and maybe your answer is the media hides it, the corporations hide it, the parties hide it. I'm not saying that you could do it, but what I'm saying right now is we have the forces that love the immigration problem are big corporations that love to lower wages, get cheap labor. Lots of Americans that like cheap labor too. I'm not saying it tends to be wealthier people, and then the left that loves to create a set of people that come into America, and we're back to our other point, and take part of our socialized system. They come into our school system. Again, I don't blame them. Kids should not have to not be in school. I'm okay with that. But we're paying a fortune to educate kids in our schools that aren't American citizens. We ought to make that decision, not be stuck with it because and the last one is the voting. I go back to, we're transforming America because we don't have a culture here that is assimilating people, and those people are politically deciding to be what I think is against what I want the future to be. I might be wrong. We're going to be a republic. We're going to vote on it, but I want to make the argument, hey, my thing has been, why not have a pause? Why not say we're going to have a pause on all immigration for 15 years? We've done this before, and say for 15 years there's no, or why don't we have something that says if you're here illegally, if you're going to stay, you're never going to vote. Now, no one will say it. In other parts of the world, it happens all the time, right? If you go to Indonesia, where I lived, people that come there, they can stay there forever. They're not going to vote. Only a certain set of people can become citizen over time. But we got to do something different to change it. And Trump, first time in 25 or 30 years, totally changed the conversation. Maybe imperfectly. I'm not against that. But changed the whole conversation on immigration.
I think the biggest mistake he did was hire Elliot Abrams down over there in Venezuela and continue those same failed Obama policies, whatnot. And, all our deals within the North Triangle. I know it's not talked about, but if you look at all the money we spend down there, all the corporations we protect down there, it's a big cause. And we haven't tried that. We haven't tried pulling out of the global South as far as our influence in these governments. I don't think Nicolas Maduro has any threat to the United States whatsoever. Why the hell are we still there? And this is something that Donald Trump couldn't even go after Anthony Blinken. I mean, Blinken just said that Juan Guaido is the interim president. I mean, come on.
I'm not. By the way, I'm with you on Elliot Abrams. I think that was a terrible hire. I think. Look, and for lots of reasons you say, but primarily because the mindset was total swamp mindset. It's as you say, it's a duopoly, and so I'm not sophisticated enough on all the rest of the details to tell you how it would happen. But
it's one area we need to look in, Ed. That's all I'm saying. It's never looked at. Nobody ever says, well, what about our interactions down there? Maybe that can cause a reason for the migration for people coming up, because we actually did a lot of work on the border. My partners are from Peru originally, and they spoke to a lot of people, and they knew what was going on. They knew the intervention from Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama at the time they went down there. And I don't believe they're coming up now that Biden's the president. I believe they're coming up because the same conditions still exist in those countries. They whisked Manuel Zelaya away in his pajamas in the middle of the night. You know what I'm saying? And next thing you know, the murder rate goes spiking up. The gangs start flourishing, whatnot. He had a lot of the things in his country under control. So I would like us to see not us intervene for a while. And I think it would change the whole immigration situation as is. I think the fact that we're causing a lot of this migration, hey, all you have to do is look at Libya, right? Look how Europe, Europe's being swamped now because we destabilized the country, and now we have an immigration problem. Omar Gaddafi said this before we killed him. Months before, say, listen, you remove me, forget about the immigration problem you guys are going to have in Europe, because they're going to come swamping in. And sure enough, it's a problem. So I really would like to take a look at those things. And I also kind of get really pissed off when Donald Trump kind of makes it like and maybe it's true, but it's like a Mariel boat lift kind of mentality. They're sending us their worst. They're bringing it like it was when Castro opened up his prisons and whatnot and said, get out of here, go to Florida. And he kind of paints that picture. I don't know. This is the part I just really don't like about Donald Trump. I know what he's saying, But once again, I think our intervention is the biggest problem, and nobody's really even talked about Democrats or Republicans. So I invite you to look at that. Once again, I support you for your opinions.
Yeah. No, look, and I think that's I think that's actually a really good. You put your finger on this in the immigration debate is I think that's a helpful way to push and say, if you're serious about cutting immigration, look at this too. One thing I just say two things on this. One is I think we have made progress. Maybe you'll agree with Trump in getting the Republican Party to understand that we're not going to try to change every foreign nation into America, right? And so if Kim Jong-un is a jerk, I think he is. If he's a son of a gun, I think he is. We can't change him. We can just box him in. Same thing with some others. So I think that's progress for us, and I think yours is a good point in terms of some of what the deep state has done more significantly. I want to make one comment on Trump. Understand, for 50 years, he has been honing his skill at using language and using things to get attention. And, again, you don't have to like the policies to recognize the skill he has now at getting attention. So when we're debating how good or bad the people coming across the border are, he's still got our attention in the place he wants it on. Like, why is that, right? Because one of the things that pisses me off, you want to know something that makes me mad, 50,000, 70,000 people in America are dying from fentanyl. And I know they're making a decision to take fentanyl. I'm not sitting here. I don't want, but I will say most of the fentanyl, as far as I can tell, comes from China through the borders. Well, however it comes, it pisses me off it's coming from China. But it's another aspect of the border question that I feel like Trump forced us to talk about that maybe we hadn't been talking about. I go crazy when I see these Republicans who stand up and pretend that they're great fighters for sex trafficking. I don't know if you've noticed this. It's very trendy on the Republican side to be the ones that are, well, we can't stand the women that are who's for the women being sex trafficked, right? I mean, this is like being for puppies, right? I mean, and you watch them all and they're heroic that we're going to do this and this and this. And I'm saying, I'm not sure that's quite the problem that we're all gathered around. I got a feeling I know why the politics of it. I think they poll it and they test it. On the other hand, when you see what's coming over the border, that question of unaccompanied minors and drugs and all, these are a lot of things that we, because of Trump's language, get us turned to it. And again, don't like it or like it, he's very effective at it.
It's one of the things I tell a lot. I used to say to a lot of my leftist friends when they get all mad, is I'm like, Juarez is right across the border, and the Juarez murder rate is ridiculous. It's more than any war going on right now. They're killing each other in the streets, but that also ties back to all the guns coming from the United States, and let's jump into this one. Let's talk about the Second Amendment, because he only mentioned it one time. While we're here, because we're talking about things going across the border, and then we'll digress back. He talked about the Second Amendment. He gave his kind of whistle to the people, Second Amendment people out there, whatnot and stuff. But when it pertains to what's going on across the border and the murder death rate in places like Juarez, shouldn't we at least, where can we come to common ground? Because I used to be, I wasn't a Second Amendment guy, but now I'm a little bit different. Right now I'm worried about the CIA coming in on me right now, and I'd like to have something to defend myself. But maybe we can't get an assault on a ban on assault weapons, which I'd like to see. But if we can't, why wouldn't we at least eliminate the gun show loophole? Because that allows people to go in, buy a semi-automatic rifle, walk out with it, no waiting period, can sell the gun off and be done with it to a cartel person who's going to take it across the border. Can't we reach common ground that way at least, or something? I mean, no?
Look, I mean, I don't know what Trump was saying. I think Trump was saying that sort of typical, the dramatic, like they're going to take your guns.
They're coming for your guns.
Yeah, we'll never let them. I mean, both sides to me demagogue this issue, and each of them does it effectively. By the way, one footnote: I don't hear anybody say this out loud, but I'll tell you. Again, if you know politics and you know campaigns, it matters. The way that the left jammed up the NRA, sued them up in New York, and got them all tied up, and exposed that they were making lots of money and paying each other. Again, the number of major political action lobbying groups that pay each other lots of money is almost 100%, right? It's not like a minor thing. But anyway, but the left jammed that up. The one thing the NRA has always been good at, if you're a candidate, you know this, they're very good at get out the vote for their members, and they did almost nothing in the fall because they were jammed up by the New York Attorney General suing them. And it was, my point is to describe a political player. So back to your question, I just think we have such a demagoguing problem on both sides that the common ground is being lost. Although I will tell you, I default to everyone defaults to things they know, people they know, and the guy Andrew Pollack, whose daughter was killed in one of the Florida shootings on a school, is it Marjorie Stoneman School, and his daughter's, he wrote a book on that with another guy looking at what happened. And it was just a comedy of errors, like a comedy of error. Now, and that's not an excuse for less or more gun control, although he advocates for more safety and therefore, but when you watch it, you're saying to yourself, other things are in play here. It's multifactorial. It's not, as you point out, are we getting across the border? Now, I want to go back to it. If you told me we had a secure border, a real secure border, you wouldn't be able to get your gun across there, would you? I mean, I'm asking. Now, you could say it's impossible to secure the border. That's another part of border security. Why do we let people drive back and forth with guns? Well, that's a pretty big loophole. Can't we stop that? I mean, I know we're letting them drive back and forth with people hidden in their car. We shouldn't let them do that either. But if we can't secure the border, what does it matter what the gun laws are? It's like I tell people they want to do a new constitutional convention. They think we'll get a better constitution. I say, we have people that don't abide by the Constitution now. We have FISA courts and secret courts and lying FBI agents. Get a new constitution? You think it's going to be better? So the Second Amendment may be imperfect in its application, but it's been pretty stabilizing in this country. And I think right about now, I'm comfortable with where we are, but I think the common ground is not possible with the two sides. The demagoguing is too strong.
You don't think that one law, though, that I just mentioned is one of the laws that can get a lot of people? I mean, a waiting period, Martin. I mean, I think a lot of people even people NRA members want sensible gun laws. In other words, not letting them end up with the wrong people's hands and whatnot. And
I don't hate closing loopholes when I see them. I think that's probably one I recognize. But I just would point out, the other part of it, the example you gave, not the one I didn't give it, you gave it, taking a gun by and then selling to the cartels. They still got to get it out of the country. Now you'll come back will be take it out of the gun show and sell it to the streets of New York City. And so maybe, I mean, again, what you have is the bad guys find ways around that. And if you did a ban, which I don't think we can get done either, maybe that would get them off. But the bad guys get the guns, and I'm just not sure that that's going to solve as much as it's a handy one to fight over.
Oh, well, I mean, a lot of the guns in Juarez come from the United States, so that's one thing we could talk about. I'm glad we did. Let's talk about sanctions, because this is another thing why Donald Trump needs to stop with these stupid sanctions, whatnot. And then he goes, they lifted the sanctions off Iran. Now, we talk about sanctions. One of the issues, we have such a migration problem in the global south is a lot of the sanctions that are down there in Venezuela. Forget about it, right? So sanctions in Iran, kill people. Sanctions from Bill Clinton in Iraq, kill children. Why are we so sanction crazy? And why is Donald Trump thinking that sanctions are okay, that it's just a mechanism to get people to negotiate with you better when you're actually being just lacking so much compassion for children who need medicine and food?
Well, I think, first of all, a broad statement on sanctions, like anything else that has to do with the swamp and the federal government, what starts out as a tool becomes something much worse. So I think I agree with you. What started out as, if you're saying, hey, we're not going to trade with you because of what you're doing, that seems like a reasonable thing. That might be called sanctions, whenever 100 years ago or something. When it comes to this ideological, as you point out, it's sort of slap sanctions here, slap sanctions there. And frankly, it's driven not by, at least as far as we can see, it's not driven by good reasons. It's driven by something, probably intelligence community, steering it. So I agree with you. On the other hand, I will say Donald Trump changed Trump is a transformative figure. Forget about how it all turns out, just how we think about things. We were told tariffs would destroy the economy, right? We were told, the Republicans, conservatives, oh my gosh, if you mess with the free market without tariffs, but calm down, Wall Street. And I think he used tariffs against the Chinese, and I think he used them effectively as an imperfect tool. In other words, did it really stop the Chinese? No, of course not. They moved things around, but it changed the conversation. So I think in the world that we're living in, I think when we're told you can't do something, tariffs, and Trump does it and you realize that it's a tool, then it's a tool. But my biggest problem right now is that the things that we believed, we the people, could be used by our government to effectively protect us, they have so readily corrupted that I can barely trust any of it. Yeah. I can't even trust when they rename the stupid post office because they're just such liars, right? That's how bad it's gotten. Yeah. Think about the FISA courts, how corrupt they were. Think about what you go down the list. And so sanctions, when they say the sanctions are for this, why would we believe them, right? So I think I agree with you on the problems they cause. I just think, as a matter of, we go to a time where we were in an ideal world, they're another tool, right? Tools can be used by people to do good things, I think. And here's one more thing I would say. A lot of the things that really are bad in the world, in my opinion, are things that are allowed to become sort of bureaucratic and long-lasting, right? If you tried to modify behavior of some regime and said, you're being a jerk and we don't want you to develop nuclear weapons, we're going to do this to you, and you did it in a short term, it would have an effect. Nothing is short term in the swamp, right? These sanctions last forever, and then they come in, come out, and all. And that's one of the things that you watch, the growth of the swamp, that the class of leaders who have power over this nation and the world that's based in Washington has gotten so big and so permanent. It's really terrifying. That should be what terrifies us.
Yeah, I know at the end of the day, it is really the whole machine. Yeah, we should say that's really running. What about, though, his sanctions when it does come to Iran? Let's talk about this right now, because like I said, I think one of Trump's biggest failed policies was his foreign policy in the global South, and then some areas in the Middle East were pretty bad. The other day that Joe Biden was able to bomb in Syria again, a lot of Trump people couldn't say anything because Trump did it himself. You know what I'm saying? Whatnot.
Yep.
You think sometimes the pandering towards Israel is a little bit too much by Donald Trump, or do you think it's right on? Because I think sometimes a lot of his foreign policy gets in trouble when he tries to pander towards Israel and Saudi Arabia. I mean, we have the Yemen situation that should have been ended so long ago. But Donald Trump's way of doing business when it came to, dealing with Saudi Arabia was letting MBS take power, giving him the nod that I got your back. And in return, we sell them more weapons. Those weapons. Yeah. And this thing's still going on. And a lot of Trump people who have said, Trump said we've got to end these endless wars, which I think is kind of bullshit. He didn't increase, the bombing in other countries. He didn't start new wars, but he did, bomb a lot, and he still had a lot of policies. He did bomb Bashar al-Assad, and whatnot. And so, I mean, to me, this is a little bit of a falsity. I appreciate the rhetoric that a lot of Trump people are using, but the pandering or the foreign policy towards Israel, don't you see that as a problem, Ed?
Well, there's a couple of questions in there. I tend to think that pandering towards any one nation too much is a problem. I like America first better, but I think what Trump tried to do, and again, we can say it didn't work or it did work. What Trump tried to do was he tried to use it seems like a theme of this. He used multi-factor situations and tried to play them all off on each other. And I think he was generally in the direction of peace. Now, I get your point. He didn't, and when I look at his thing, he didn't get control of the swamp on personnel. He didn't get in control of the swamp on all kinds of things, and certainly on foreign policy. I went to the State Department a few months after Trump was in, and I was visiting with a friend of mine, and she was kind of high up in one aspect, and she said, you wouldn't believe how when Trump won and Hillary lost, the Obama administration did rapidly transformed a bunch of the political jobs into career jobs, and everybody burrowed in, and the whole place was, has a worldview that you wouldn't be surprised in. Trump didn't beat all that, and even on Pompeo, I think Pompeo is more before Trump. Pompeo was more neocon than not. I mean, so here we are. But again, I kind of think directionally. I don't think you could actually succeed if you didn't understand in the moment Trump's in that you got to get as much as you can and play the game. I mean, think about this. Pause and say, what happens after Trump won? The Republican establishment had shivved him in the back repeatedly and left him for dead after the Billy Bush weekend. And what does he do? The first two appointments are Paul Ryan's best friend, Reince Priebus, as chief of staff. Not like, I'll give you the Commerce Department, chief of staff. And the second one is Elaine Chao, Mitch McConnell's wife, as the head of transportation. Like, he went and he said, I'm going to play ball with this swamp because I got to try to survive. I like to think it like that. I want to be more generous because I don't want to think he was in the swamp for good. But because in the right places, I think you saw Trump making progress. Not enough. Not enough, but enough progress. But in my head, a second term could have been, and who knows what it would have been. It could have been a time where he continued that direction. But back to Iran. I think the president was making a calculation that if he plays hard with Iran, he's getting other things other places. Yes, with Israel. He needed Israel to trust him, to try to make Israel do some things they hadn't in terms of peace. To try, the trick has always been, you can say we should stop being so close to Israel, but we are, however we got there, getting Israel to move is the challenge, right? Getting Israel to say, we'll change directions. Did he succeed enough? Probably not. He certainly didn't succeed enough with the Saudis and others, I agree with, but I think that's what he was trying to do. And back to your observation, I just think for American sort of recent political history, he's the best we've had at trying to get us towards the direction of less engagement and less of these build out. True, and one concession. He didn't stop the military-industrial complex from selling. They kept selling. I'm not saying he did, but at least it was directionally. And the Republican Party, before Trump, Republican Party was full of people that said, what we did with Bush and Cheney, it was great. It's the right thing. Let's keep going. That's gone. That's long gone.
Yeah, it's funny because that's how low the bar is set when it comes to policy.
That's
like
true.
Trump didn't start any new wars. I'm saying? Well, he increased the bombing in Afghanistan and he tried. And I really wish he would have pulled the plug early. He waited too long for the whole Afghan-Iraq situation. He should have done it early. But then again, the forces he's working against, we don't know. It's
right.
It's crazy. That's a tough one. Let's talk about energy because this is something really, to tell you the truth. I don't understand the whole concept when it comes to, and once again, I understand, when people start talking about global warming, I know a lot of conservatives think that the left, it's not the fact that they don't believe in some form of climate change, it's that they believe that the left are alarmist, right? And they're a little bit too much on it. But why can't we find a happy medium? And this is something I can't stand about Donald Trump, about the drill baby drill mentality, because let's put aside the fact that it could be destroying the ozone layer. We can't argue the fact that oil and water don't mix. And if I was president day one, I told my mother, I said, hey, Mom, day one, because she talks about, Biden's killing these jobs when he gets away from the oil lines and stuff like that. Day one, I would eliminate fracking. And I would find a way that we can meet halfway, get some solar panels on some houses, whatnot. But he keeps on saying, well, wind doesn't work. It kills the birds. I know. And they're rusty and they're terrible and stuff like that. But why can't the party of individual responsibility be a little bit responsible when it comes to our environment?
Wait a second. I think let's unpack this a little bit. First of all,
please.
On the Keystone Pipeline, I and my old boss, Phyllis Schlafly, opposed the Keystone Pipeline because we've said, and it's simply true, it's not a Keystone Pipeline for America. It's Canadian and oil refiners in Texas, and it's meant to enrich multinational corporations. And even though it's true there are great jobs, and once we started the Keystone Pipeline, there are jobs there. Those jobs end after it's done. They're not American. They're not sustained American jobs. Nobody's refining anything on the Keystone Pipeline. So the fact is, that's, again, demagoguing, right? That was, again, and the environmentalist part of that to me was, I don't care about that. I think we should be careful. We should make enough regulations without poisoning things. But the Keystone Pipeline was never about American jobs in the sense that there'll be 10 years of jobs, then it'll be gone forever, and it'll be like a lot of other pipelines. So, so that's demagogue.
I wish Trump had that attitude towards pipelines.
That's right. And so, but here's the thing on this. I think Trump took us, in terms of the energy department, he took us in the direction of what I would call an all of the above. I'm not against windmills out in California. We're talking about California, where my wife is from out there. You go down to Palm Springs, you see those fields. In Europe, I'm not against windmills, but they have at this point in history, they have a certain value. Same thing with solar. Until we get, until Tesla and what's his name, Elon Musk decide to help us figure out batteries, they're just only so valuable. That's the reality. But here's the all of the above solution. Includes nuclear. Now, when I was chief of staff in Missouri, we have a nuclear plant down there in the center of the state. So I got familiar with the old stuff because we had to worry about it. You're now chief of staff to the governor. They talk about it, meltdown and all these kinds. So I had to learn about it. We're so far from that in terms of the possibilities of nuclear that can be doesn't melt down. It actually reuses its waste. I'm for all of the above. But I will say this. We do more to keep our are water and air clean than anybody else. I mean, there's probably a few nations that do a little more.
That's not good enough, Ed. I hate that answer. I'm just going to say that right now. Just because somebody else sucks at polluting we can do more. And if we
it's like mandates in Texas for the coronavirus. You at a certain point, you ask your leaders to make a risk management of what it costs compared to what you get. And I think with Trump, my opinion is we headed towards a better balance. I think we're lurching back the other way, but frankly, Biden's a liar. He's not actually lurching back much at all. He signed
31 oil permits right after. He canceled one so the people see that, and then he signs off for 31. We had the same thing in California with Jerry Brown, who was looked at, oh my God, this guy is the new leader when it comes to climate control. Like, hell no, he's signing off oil rigs all over the place. Biden is the same way. I mean, don't get me wrong. Even if I'm a leftist, people would ask me, gun to my head, if I had to vote for Trump or Biden. I say, put the gun down. It's Trump, because that's how much I cannot believe in the establishment, But once again, I wouldn't vote for Trump because he's not my cup of tea. But Donald Trump did not push, and I think we should do this, Ed. If we push solar panels on every house, that doesn't mean we have to switch off the solar panel, but it means we can take away from what we use on the grid. That doesn't mean we have to eliminate complete oil and coal and whatnot, but we can lessen our dependency on that, and that's something I never see getting done. It's plain and simple. The sun's not going away, and we can have solar panels on the houses and really get off a lot of the oil that we're dependent upon.
Okay, but I mean, I will say this. Most of my experience with solar and wind in Missouri was that the process was corrupt, meaning it only was happening because the government was paying or the tax credits were paying. And again, I'm not, there's lots of stupid tax credits too. I got up and close to personal with them when I was in Missouri government. But I would much rather, and we're either going to clean up coal. I mean, find ways to do it cleaner in terms of, carbon capture and other things, or that's going to change too. But that's another one, by the way. I would just as soon have somebody figure out carbon capture. If you could figure out carbon capture and get that cost down, we could take carbon out of the air as fast as it goes in the air, and we can keep cleaning. I think technology is going to make the world different. But what I was for was Trump going hard for nuclear, going hard for all the different getting rid of regulations to try to make things work. And here's the other thing. I think you agree. We did get less dependent on some of the bad guys in the world who used to really hold a gun to our head. Still not 100%, still lots of entanglements, but I think that was a positive part of that too, we had enough crap in enough America. Let's go get our own stuff. If you want to do it cleaner, I'm not against it. Let's talk about it, but let's not depend on the Saudis for things if we can help it.
I hear you. That's something we'll have to have another conversation at the next Thanksgiving Day dinner. Let's finish up with the elections, because I want to know how you thought his speech was, because now here's something that's funny. It's like on January 6th, I was there in DC. I went to the Ellipse. I watched the speech. I heard Donald Trump say twice, and we're going to do it peacefully because we're the party of law and order. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I didn't think he incited that the violence or whatever you want to call it whatsoever. It certainly wasn't an insurrection. I mean, if there were Trump people who wanted to take over the Capitol, they'd still probably be there to this day. You know what I'm saying? Trying to hold the thing down. I was out all summer, saw a lot of protests, went to Portland. So I'm no stranger to what happens at these events. But he did talk about the election there at the Ellipse. And he did talk about the election the other day at CPAC. What grade would you give him for his discussions on voting? Because, like I said, we were educating people. I've been around since 2016, so I understand the framework. A lot of people don't even understand who makes their absentee ballots. I understand. I've read the contract, so I know. You know what I'm saying? Right. But what were your thoughts? Because I want to talk about, because there is one thing I dislike about the whole approach that came from Giuliani, the approach that came from Donald Trump. Your thoughts as overall grades on
first of all, let me say, and I think this might work for you, and I'll probably get in trouble for this comment, but I was there too on January 6th, and I was at the Ellipse, and then I was up towards the Capitol. My office is a few blocks away. I was gone from the Capitol area. I didn't realize kind of people had gotten in, but I got to my office and saw it. So, and I agree with you. It was, in fact, when I look at the people that committed some vandalism and whatever, it reminds me like of a Jets Giants tailgate. If you've ever, when you go to the tailgate, some of these people look like they They don't look exactly all there. On the other hand, I'm not sure that they can qualify for an insurrection. I just don't quite see that they had that put together quite like that. So, but I do think this. That was used as a crisis by Nancy Pelosi, the mainstream media, and big tech as a textbook. And they've used it to this day. They're up there testifying, FBI Director Wray saying international terrorists were inspired by what they saw. These people are lunatics if you don't understand what they're doing, which is the narrative machine is grinding into the American consciousness, just like they said Russia stole the election in 2016, right? They don't care about the truth. Officer Stepnick, as I pronounce it right, it was murdered, they said, by a fire extinguisher. It's not true. It's patently not true. The New York Times retracted it. And yet American people think that there was a cop murdered by, as you and I both know, I join this, maybe you wouldn't. If you murder a cop, if somebody murders a cop, we'll start the manhunt for a cop killer, man. And cops don't stop searching until they get a cop killer. And after this, no one's figured out who. Anyway, my point is the narrative machine. But back to your point, my concern with the CPAC speech, Trump on election reform, is that I ran the Board of Elections in St. Louis in 2005 and 2006. And like you, I've read the contracts on this stuff. I recognize the complexity of what an election is and what the tools are that are involved now. And I recognize the number of areas where there are real security threats. So now when you pause and you say, okay, we had a fake news mainstream media pounding a message from the summer on that the COVID message was one message, but that Trump was Hitler and that the polls were terrible for Trump. And over, all these beating drums, boom, boom, boom. Then we have an election, and suddenly, the School of Wharton at University of Pennsylvania in 2016 had a vast study on how the electronic systems that were used for elections are deeply flawed and they're hackable. It's disappeared from their website now. It's gone, right? I mean, the left was questioning all this stuff, and now we're told something. It's so odd. It's not odd. You and I both know why. We're told if you ask questions about the 2020 election, if you actually talk about it incorrectly, we have to shut you down because
we're demonetized. We're demonetized.
And you're demonetized. Yeah, you're demonetized though because we actually think you probably are part of the insurrection types that gathered, and you're probably a white supremacist. And here's the trick, as you know, is over time, normal people, not you and me, they step away from the group that's called white supremacists and insurrection. That's not just where you want to hang out, right? I mean, if you say it enough, you're like, I think I'll step back a little bit. Politics and campaigns are about winning on the edges to close to shrink the group down so that you're smaller and smaller. And I will say, we will win, meaning the American people will not have a free or fair election. We will not have progress in this country if we don't get to the bottom of what really happened in November. And my thing is this, I will say up front so we can try to not get banned on all the social media, all the media, is this. I do not believe that whatever we find out should change who is president. Our Constitution put in John Kennedy when he cheated. It put in lots of people when they cheated. Lyndon Johnson when he cheated as a senator. I'm not saying we change. We have a president. But if we don't go back and figure out what really happened to restore, and here's the trick. This is why I was dissatisfied with Trump. There's two reasons. One is to restore confidence in the system. That's the overarching reason. But the bigger reason, and the reason that's more complicated, is you will not get the people in America, the Republicans, to pass the real reform in the state legislatures if they don't actually get the grassroots and the facts behind it. And the last part of that is if you read the Time Magazine article on the insiders who
I did a whole report on it.
Yeah, if you read that closely, and you have, but if your viewers do, what you sit back when you finish, and you should think to yourself two things. One is, they really tried to cover their ass. They said they did all this stuff, but none of it was illegal. You say, how often do people that are so committed stop short of that? Maybe. But the second thing you should realize is they'll do it again, and here's the key. In August of 2022, when Mark Elias and the Democrats go into court, and they go into court in Pennsylvania, and they say to a judge, these restrictions are improper. There's no factual basis for this. There's no predicate for doing this. There's no compelling interest. There's no reason they should have done it. And the judge will look over and say, is there any reason? There's 74,000 published accounts that there was no evidence of voter fraud. You just made this up. This is a way just to suppress people, and we'll be getting beaten in the courts just like we did in the 2020. Trump lost the election in 2020 insofar as he lost because he didn't have a legal strategy all summer long when they set up the way to hold him in abeyance. And then after that, there's lots of decisions. So I'm dissatisfied with all the Republicans that think passing a photo ID is going to solve the problem, because it's not going to change a thing if you don't prove what happened.
HR 1 is a disaster. It allows for more avenues of fraud.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because, like, you know, when I remember specifically when I was getting close to the Capitol on January 6th, some people were asking, what are you doing? What are you talking about? And I introduced myself. My name is Pasta. I have a show called the Convo Couch. We're election integrity activists. Oh, you study elections? How long have you been doing it? And I said, well, since the 2016 primary, when the Democratic lawyers said in court that they can go into the back room full of cigar smoke and pick whoever they want, that gentleman looked at me in a MAGA hat and everything. He goes, you know what? We didn't pay attention to that, and I'm sorry. And I was just like taken back. I'm like, oh, wow. He's like, yeah. He goes, because now we know what it's like. Now we're here to the party. And I think that Donald Trump has explained a lot of things, but there's also parts of his speech and parts of the Giuliani team where once again they pivot towards illegal aliens, and I think that's taking their eye off the prize, because I believe a lot of the people who voted that shouldn't have voted were people who moved, and their ballots are just out there now, and a nefarious character can get it out, and people who died. You know what I'm saying? That's the majority of the people. It's election fraud. It's not voter fraud. We don't put it on the voter. We put it on the election because we put it on the body of the people who cheated. This is mass amount of ballots. Yeah. So I still see that when he does that, and Giuliani said that one time before. Sidney Powell talked about Venezuela, when I know for a fact that 2 years before that, a guy by the name of Clint Curtis in Florida was approached by the legislation in Florida to make a program that flipped votes. It's been around. And the fact is that people were concentrating on Dominion, when they weren't talking about ES&S and HART and Smartmatic, which guess what? They have the same type of software where we can see it. And it does. And I think he really missed that point of saying, listen, we got to get rid of this proprietary software. We cannot have proprietary software. We can't have black box voting. We need an open source system. And now we have to fix the mail-in system. All right. The mail-in system is Shotsky. We have to fix it and stuff. So I think he loses a little bit of attention from those people on the left when he does kind of refer to illegal aliens. So
I'm by the way, let me say this. I agree with you on the fact that if we don't get some kind of change in the fact that we don't know what the software is, there's just no way anyone will ever trust the election. I mean, and again, I ran the election board. I saw all these companies were trying to sell me their stuff, and we all were dealing with, again, history's for another time about the Help America Vote Act and all that. I think what Trump does with the illegal immigration comment on that, because I don't see any math that makes it the illegals that voted in Arizona flip the election. I don't think that's right. I think it was a series of things put together. But again, right now we're not even allowed to know. You and I are not even allowed to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. Ed, let's wrap this up. That was a great conversation. We got a couple other shows today. I'd like to have you on again. Like I said, you're special to me because we were on my favorite show together first time.
There you go.
And I really think that we have to continue to have talks across party lines right now. The one thing that Donald Trump was right about is the cancel culture is disgusting. And he says, you know me, you come here, we debate. So let's continue to have the debate.
Yeah.
Pasta Jardula, Ed Martin, tell everybody where they can find you. And,
well, until this appearance, I was on social media on at Eagle Ed Martin on Twitter. Who knows if it'll be there? Facebook, Ed Martin Live, and all on Gavin Parlor, Ed Martin. But also our website, my organization is phyllisschlafly.com. If you're interested in the history of what Phyllis did and what we do, phyllisschlafly.com. There's a lot there. It's a great resource.
Next time we get together, we're going to talk about China. This Friday, we're having Danny Haifong on because I disagree with you on certain things. There are certain things I agree. But once again, we'll talk about China. For Pasta Jardula, Ed Martin, we'll see you later. Convo out, everybody.